Salofalava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuki. Coming up.
We do not even know in Fiji. One in particular was Rapa Nui.
FestPac delegates say the region is battling against cultural erosion. Also,
landslide site is designated, I think already designated, as a mass burial site.
Relocating evacuees in PNG is now top priority, and
I think it's just become, for some, quite expensive to be engaged in the program.
Kiwi employers call for changes to the RSC scheme. Delegates at the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture say the event is a symbol for regional unification and the fight against cultural extinction. The world's largest event celebrating Pacific culture has united thousands of people, including leaders, performers and spectators through uplifting marginalized indigenous groups. Hawaii's theme is Ho'ohulu Lahui, regenerating Oceania, a powerful phrase underscoring the need for cultural practices to be revitalized and safeguarded for future generations. Tiana Haxton spoke to attendees in Honolulu.
A community elder from Guam says the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture is about more than revitalizing cultures. Anthony Boyer says it is a fight against the extinction of Pacific people.
You get so emotional when you think of extinction, but we're gonna do something about it. You hear what you see now.
He says he was blown away by talented young people representing their nations with pride. Hotu Itiariki, a performer from Rapa Nui, says their large team of all ages is a showcase of intergenerational knowledge.
We come with children from 9 years until 65 years old or 70 years old. There's kind of huge variety in this delegation where you can see and maybe share or ask different point of views from different generations all in the same place at the same time.
For one delegate, the festival has been an eye-opening experience. Deputy Head of Delegation for Fiji, Emosi Kaniongo, says he's learned about neighbouring nations he never knew existed.
Well, to be honest and be frank, some of the Pacific nations we do not even know in Fiji. One in particular was Rapa Nui. So beautiful, so handsome, and the art and craft is amazing to another level.
Festival organisers say this interchange of traditional knowledge emphasises the value of the event. Over 2,000 delegates from all across the Pacific have travelled to Hawaii for the 10-day festival. Letila Mitchell of the South Pacific community says the gathering of thousands of Indigenous people is momentous.
As we come together as a community, we weave together, we dance, we sing together, we talk, we think. And it's a very powerful movement when Pacific peoples come together, and so it's really important for this platform to continue every 4 years.
The festival wraps up this weekend. The 14th edition is scheduled for 2028, set to be hosted in New Caledonia.
Pacific Health leader Sir Colin Tukuitonga has been appointed to work for the World Health Organization. After resigning from all New Zealand government groups citing a no confidence, he'll now be chairing the advisory group on the prevention and control of non-communicable diseases. Sir Colin says he'll give advice on how to best manage obesity, diabetes, heart disease and other non-communicable diseases that affect the Māori and Pacific communities disproportionately. He spoke with Alicia Foon about his new role.
It's a strategic group. It doesn't get into the details. It most certainly doesn't get into the budgets. But clearly, a key issue for the group will be about how do we secure finances to make sure that there's enough money for member states of WHO to do the work.
Long term, how can we collectively improve Pacific health considering we face so many non-communicable diseases?
Yeah, it's a hard one, eh? I mean, if I knew that, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be out there making the most of it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the problem. We've known about diabetes from the 70s, possibly earlier. and we're still struggling with it. And meanwhile, diabetes rates, particularly in the islands, continue to rise. I mean, it's highly unlikely that there's a one single solution, but even so, we are still devoid of things that we know are effective. So that's the challenge. That's why the World Health Organization has set up the scientific and technical group to support her, to provide advice, to try to find out what would work, because so far we haven't found anything that's effective. So it's a big challenge, absolutely.
On a grassroots level, sometimes it can be seen, and we've heard from people, that they don't always know what the WHO or United Nations are doing, because sometimes it can feel like potentially talking heads or people making decisions on their behalf. But at a grassroots level, what strategies and advice will you be making that would directly impact them?
I mean, at a community level, as you say, as a grassroots level, we know already, it's people choosing a healthier diet, people not smoking, reducing salt consumption, getting more physical activity, all of those sorts of things. We know at an intellectual level, the challenge, of course, is how do you support people to do that? And we have some ideas with regard to smoking cessation. We know what works. But there's still an awful lot of people who continue to smoke. In other words, having the knowledge about a risk factor, unhealthy diets, and choosing a healthy diet is very complex. So at one level, it's a simple message that we keep repeating at the national, at the country level, at the individual and family level. But then, of course, beyond that, there are global issues like trade. So people consuming high amounts of processed foods, imported foods, is, again, the domain of global food companies that make and market the stuff. So it's obviously very complex. I do think it's important to get UN level, WHO level support, because that's where the political commitments and hopefully translated into resources happen. So you need all of these actions at the individual level, family level, community, nation, region, and global. You need all of those things happening at the same time. So far, of course, it's been difficult because often the power of governments pales into insignificance when you look at the power of Coca-Cola and McDonald's and the big food companies in terms of marketing. The governments, the health departments don't come close to the marketing muscle of the global food company.
How can some of the work that you do truly change the conversation? Can you be involved in campaigns and that sort of thing? What kind of budgeting do you have available to go head to head with some of these huge companies? Is that even achievable?
We don't even come close. I mean, I understand, for example, that the total budget of the World Health Organization is less than the budget of the New York Health Department alone. And comparing public health spend from governments to corporate global companies, again, it's not even close. So there's always going to be a mismatch of the resources available to public health entities compared with the private sectors. But, things do work. I mean, you'd be aware that the smoking rates in 14, 15-year-olds in New Zealand is now less than 2%. All kids, all young people, Maori, Pacific, Pākehā. So occasionally you have some wins. Unfortunately, they often takes a very long time, but we do succeed even with a budget mismatch between the public health agencies and the private sector.
The number of people killed and displaced in the horrific landslide in Papua New Guinea's Inga province remains unknown. Hundreds are thought to have been buried in their sleep when it hit Yambali village in the early hours of 24th of May. Efforts are now focusing on relocating and evacuating other villages who are in danger of more slips after geotechnical assessments revealed volatile land. Delphine Herbert reports.
In the days after the terrifying landslide, survivors, villagers and recovery teams worked around the clock to find any survivors and to recover bodies. Some people even dug through the mud with their bare hands. The government paused the excavation of bodies a week ago due to the danger, and only 12 had been recovered. The landslide is now considered a mass burial site, and United Nations International Organization for Migration's chief Sidan Abdulprak says local officials are considering doing something to remember those who have lost their lives.
The landslide site is designated, I think already designated, as a mass burial site. And they are considering, the provincial administration is considering potentially to erect a monument to honor the victims.
The landslide, which covers about 14 hectares, has cut off a critical road to the Pugera Valley, where about 100,000 people live. Sidan Abdulprak says the highway is a lifeline.
Now, it is yet to be seen what kind of solutions will be put in place. Could there be another road that could be bypassing this blocked section be built? We are yet to be advised on this.
New Zealand sent a team of geotechnical experts and search and rescue personnel to do air and land assessments. They gave advice to local officials to evacuate and relocate due to the imminent risk of more landslides. Urban Search and Rescue team leader Aaron Waterous was one of the people who went over and says the team identified another route to connect the Pugera Valley.
One of the things that we were able to do and provide some advice on was to reroute the road that's been cut off. That whole road through that valley is very, very susceptible to further landslips. So we've been able to identify a far safer route for the road to be rerouted, so that will provide ongoing, I guess, resilience for the people up the Pugera Valley.
Aaron Waterous says while he was there to assist in carrying out the assessments, he says the scene and impact on the villagers was confronting.
The scale of it, again, is quite massive, and when you're on the ground and you realise what you're standing in front of, which was essentially a mass grave where people were still trying to locate their loved ones. They were digging with small hand tools and shovels and bits of wood to try and move rocks to locate their loved ones. So, that sort of the humanitarian side of it, I guess, it sort of hits you pretty hard when you're faced with it.
Efforts are now on those who have been advised to relocate to do so. More than 1,500 people have been confirmed as being displaced so far, with that number expected to rise. Regional Development Officer at the UN Migration Agency, Yashi Bhattacharya, says temporary options are being looked at currently.
We are looking at transitional shelter solutions. Also providing food assistance, NFIs, hygiene, dignity kits, and also health support, mental health, psychosocial support, and assistance to affected communities.
She says a long-term plan is also being put in place.
At the foundation of it all, what is very important for us to recognize is that the humanitarian community supports all efforts which bring an end to displacement and promote lasting solutions for displaced persons, where there are, for example, conducive conditions for safe, voluntary, and dignified relocation.
The true number of people who need to be relocated won't be known for some time.
Some employers in New Zealand who are part of the recognised seasonal employer scheme want changes because of the cost. This is the assessment from Australian National University researcher Charlotte Bedford, who said support for the scheme remains high, but there are some elements that employers would like to see changed. The employers have raised concerns about the loading on top of the minimum wage they're obliged to pay, restrictions on rents, and having to guarantee 30 hours of work per week. The number of workers coming in for both the New Zealand and Australian schemes is also down. Don Wiseman asked Charlotte Bedford, who was with the Development Policy Centre at the ANU, whether the shine was going off the seasonal schemes.
I can only really talk for the New Zealand scheme. I wouldn't say necessarily the shine has gone off, just that there's perhaps just a plateau at the moment in terms of demand. I think that's driven by a lot of factors. I think there's a lot of commitment still to the RSE scheme. Employers are very supportive of it and committed to it, and the relationships that they've built with workers and families and communities in the Pacific. I think it's just become, for some, quite expensive to be engaged in the program. And so my sense is that, industry's just looking for some discussions with government around perhaps whether they can make it a little less expensive for employers at this stage. But I wouldn't say the shine has gone off. I think the sort of public perception of it, perhaps, in terms of there's far more rhetoric now around sort of exploitation and things, which is quite interesting because when the scheme was set up in 2007, it was driven by industry. They were seeking labour, and one of the sort of commitments at the time was that with the introduction of the RSE scheme, that they would clean up sort of grower practices and remove the use of illegal labour and sort of tidy up the horticulture and viticulture sectors. So it's interesting that a scheme that was designed to remove sort of any exploitation, now there's a bit of discourse around it that it itself has exploitation in it, which I personally don't think is really an issue, but it's interesting to see.
When we talk about the employers being concerned about costs, have they had additional costs placed on them in recent years?
Yes, there have been a few changes. There was the shift to the 30 hours a week and making sure that you paid 30 hours every week. That came in during COVID, and that was a change away from being able to average out hours over the duration of the worker's contract. So they shifted to 30 hours, which I think was a very good thing because workers have fixed costs while they're in New Zealand, quite a lot of fixed costs. So it's important that, they are actually earning enough money to, cover those costs and be making some money that they can go home with. But on top of that, they've now got the increase to the minimum wage, and then 10% above minimum wage must be paid to RSE workers. They've got the freeze at the moment on accommodation costs, which came in 2019 and means they're not able to charge any more for rent to workers than they could then. And there are some, new sick leave provisions as well, which also add a bit of a cost to employers.
The farmers' concern about the 30 hours minimum every week is because, of course, horticulturalists often can't work a 40-hour week, but then the following week they can work 60. They want to see that 30-hour period levied over a longer number of weeks. Is that right?
That's right. Yep, that's correct.
And they're asking government to change the rule.
Well, they're asking them to sort of reconsider it, I guess, at this stage and see whether it's possible to go to averaging over a 4-week period. So they don't want to go back to what was originally in place, which is averaging over the duration of the contract. But yes, I think there are some small growers with very sharp seasonal peaks who perhaps they might need quite a lot of workers at a set time, but it's difficult for them then to find enough work to cover those 30 hours. Particularly if they have, periods of bad weather or the crop's not ready for, to be picked. So they are just asking whether that can be reconsidered. I think that the 10% above the minimum wage for RSE workers is perhaps, this is just my personal view, the one that requires some more thought, because I'm not clear why RSE workers should be earning more than New Zealanders when the scheme was set up with the New Zealander First principle in it. It is designed to employers that seek New Zealand labour first ahead of using RSE workers, and I'm unclear why there's now this discrepancy between the what you pay your RSE workers and what you pay your Kiwis.
All right, in terms of the numbers, New Zealand extended the number of people they were prepared to bring in to 19,500, but the numbers this year are not going to get anywhere near that. Why is that?
Well, they're only going to be perhaps the estimate, I think that's in my pieces, they're about 1,700 workers short. I think recovery from last year's cyclone, ongoing recovery work there has certainly perhaps reduced numbers in Hawke's Bay and in Gisborne. And I think there's just perhaps for some, they haven't brought in the full allocation that could be related to costs for some employers. For others, I think access to accommodation, finding suitable accommodation they may not have been able to do in the last year. And so they just haven't needed to fill their full allocation of labour.
Well, the government is talking about bringing in more, isn't it? It said it was going to extend that quota.
Yes, before sort of pre-election promise was to increase the numbers to 38,000 over the next 5 years. I don't think that was really driven necessarily by industry or certainly by horticulture. I think in viticulture, I think perhaps government had thought that if they did that, there was maybe an expansion of the RSE scheme to other sectors as well. But I don't see that level of demand required under the RSE in horticulture and viticulture. And I don't think there hasn't really been any further talk about that. So it'd be interesting to see whether that takes place or not.
Now, over the last 18 months or so, there's been significant discussion in places like Samoa about the brain drain and people leaving quite high-powered jobs and coming to New Zealand to go fruit picking. And their numbers have been now trimmed back, the same with Tonga and the same with Vanuatu, all for similar reasons, I think.
Yes, all for similar reasons. I think employers are responding to the concerns that have been raised there. Samoa has reviewed they've developed a labour mobility policy. They're yet to implement some of those changes, but they're making quite a few changes to the way that employers are able to recruit. Vanuatu's also had a review of their labour mobility policy, and Tonga has done a sort of labour mobility supply management strategy. So yes, they're all looking more closely at who is heading overseas and perhaps some of those impacts at home of the loss of sort of productive working age men and women. But yes, employers have responded, I think, to those concerns and encouragement from MB to look to other countries, and PNG certainly, one of the key options.
The number of Papua New Guineans coming in is up 325%, and very high rises for Solomon Islands, I think, as well, and Fiji.
Yes, yeah. So both Solomons and Fiji have had over 1,000 workers within the last year, and that's the first time that they have sent that many within a year. So it's good. It's really I see it as very positive. It's employers responding to suggestions that have been made around perhaps looking elsewhere and not being too heavily reliant on three countries, particularly as Australia continues to expand. And there are significant numbers from Vanuatu, Samoa, and Tonga going to Australia as well. So it's a very positive shift.
That's Pacific Waves for today. To listen back, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā soifua.